Hey guys, today in Algebra 1 we're going to talk about solving single-step equations. So first off we're going to start with just basic addition and subtraction. So as you can see on number 1 it says solve each equation and check your solution. So the equation reads h minus 3 equals negative 2. So our goal is to solve for the variable. The variable is h. Now, I'm sure with a little bit of critical thinking you could probably look at this and figure out the number that h is supposed to be. However, what's really important in this chapter is that we show every single step before we get the answer. We need to show all work. There should be nothing done in your head. Now to do this, we're going to use the addition property of equality and the subtraction property of equality. Basically what these say is that whatever you do to one side of an equation, you need to do to the other side just to keep it balanced. So on number 1, h minus 3 equals negative 2, our goal is to get the variable h all by itself on one side of the equal sign. And currently what's attached to this h is a minus 3. So we're taking this h and we're subtracting 3. Now to get h by itself, we need to do the opposite of what's happening right now. So since we're subtracting 3, to get that minus 3 to go away, we need to add 3. So if I'm going to add 3 to the left side by the addition property of equality, since I added 3 to the left side of this equal sign, I also need to add 3 to the right side of this equal sign. Notice I showed that step. I wrote it on each side, and that's very important. So now that I've done that, I can see what I have left. So first of all, I have h minus 3, and then I'm adding 3 to that side. So negative 3 plus 3. If you need, you can get out your calculator and try that out. But hopefully you understand that minus 3 plus 3 cancels out to leave me with 0. So that means that I'm just left with h on the left side. Then I'm going to bring down my equal sign. And on the right side, I have negative 2 plus 3. So I want to add those together. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. Now if you'll notice, I have h all by itself on one side of the equal sign. So we're done. H equals 1. Now since I've shown work here, I want to box my final answer. However, what they want is they want us to check the solution. So I'm going to show you how to check your solution on this first one, and then we'll talk about what you guys can do for the following problems after that. So what we need to do to check the solution is we need to take that answer that we got for h and substitute it back into our original equation. Now this is really important. Whenever we substitute something back in, we need to put parentheses around it. So instead of h minus 3, I want to substitute that 1 in for h. So I'm going to have 1 minus 3, and then I have an equal sign and a negative 2. So what we're really saying is we want to make sure that this side will equal this side. So does 1 minus 3 equal negative 2? So let's simplify this left side. 1 minus 3, if you need your calculator, again, you can use that, but you don't have to. 1 minus 3 will give me negative 2. And then I'm going to bring down my equal sign and bring down what's on the right side. Oh, that's not a 2. So we're left with negative 2 equals negative 2. Now since my left side equals my right side, that means that this one is definitely your correct answer. So I understand that showing this work is just a little bit monotonous. You do it all the time. So you do not have to show this step. I want you to on the first one so you know what we're talking about, but in the future we can do that in our calculator. But there is no excuse to ever get an incorrect answer on any of these problems because you can always substitute it back in to make sure that it's the correct one. So let's go to number 2. I have m minus 8 equals negative 12. So here the variable that we want to get by itself is the m. And what's happening to the m right now is it's subtracting 8. So to get rid of that minus 8, we need to add 8. And whatever we do to the left side, we also need to do to the right side. Now, if I add 8 to the left side, that minus 8 and plus 8 is going to cancel out, and that's going to leave me with m. And then I can bring down my equal sign, and then I need to add negative 12 plus 8. So again, if you need your calculator, it's definitely okay. Negative 12 plus 8 gives me negative 4. So box your answer. Because we have the variable all by itself on one side, we showed all our work, we need to box our final answer. Now, to check our solution, you can write it out like this to make sure, or what we can do is we can use our calculator. So if I get out my calculator, I know that I have, well, that's not what I wanted. I have the equation m minus 8 equals negative 12. So I want to substitute in for m this negative 4. So I put parentheses around the negative 4, and then I substitute in the negative 8. So m minus 8, but I want parentheses negative 4 minus 8. And if we did it correctly, we should get a result of negative 12. And we do, so we're okay. Number 3, 20 equals y plus 8. This one's a little different because the variable's on the right-hand side, but that's still okay. Our goal is still to get the variable all by itself on one side of the equal sign. So here I have a y being added to 8. Now I want the y by itself, so to get rid of the plus 8, we need to subtract 8 from each side. So whatever I do to this side of the equal sign, I need to do to this side of the equal sign. And let's see what happens. So if I take 20 and subtract 8, 20 minus 8 is 12. Then I'm going to bring down my equal sign. And then on this side I have a plus 8 and a minus 8 which cancel out, and I'm left with a y. Now the y is all by itself on one side of the equal sign, so we can put a box around our answer. Just so you are aware, if this bothers you, some people like the variable to be on the left side. That's definitely okay. You are more than welcome to switch it. It doesn't bother me. If the variable's on the right side or the left side, it's totally okay as long as it's all by itself. Now, let's go ahead and let's check our answer in our calculator. So we want to make sure that y equals 12. So we substitute the 12 in for y, so we're going to put this side into our calculator. So parentheses 12, and then they added 8 to it, and we should get 20, which we did. On number 4, we have k plus 0.5 equals 2.3. Now, here we have decimals involved, but that's okay. It's still the same process. So we are going to work on getting the variable all by itself on one side of the equal sign. So here we have 0.5 being added to k, so we need to do the opposite to get rid of it. So we're going to subtract 0.5 from each side. So subtract 0.5 from the left side of the equal sign, and subtract 0.5 from the right side of the equal sign. On the left side, when I subtract, those 0.5s are going to cancel out and leave me with k. On the right side, I might need a calculator for this one because this is a little bit tricky to do in my head. I want to take 2.3 minus 0.5, and we're going to get 1.8. Now that I have the variable all by itself, I can box my answer, and I want to check it in my calculator. So I want to take this 1.8 and add it back to the 0.5. So 1.8 plus 0.5, I hope we get 2.3, and we do, so we definitely did it correctly. Number 5, we have fractions, but that's all right. We want to get the w all by itself on one side of the equal sign, and currently it's subtracting 1/2, so that means we need to add 1/2 to each side of our equal sign. So add 1/2 to the left, add 1/2 to the right. And when I do that, on the left side it's going to cancel out and leave me with w. Bring down my equal sign. And on the right side, I want to take 5/8 and add it to 1/2. So just a quick refresher, to add fractions, you need to have a common denominator. So the common denominator between 8 and 2 would be 8. So 1/2 to turn into a denominator of 8 means I would need to multiply it by 4 over 4, which means 1 times 4 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8. I'm actually adding 4/8. Ooh. If I could write, let's try again, 4/8. So once we have the common denominator, we want to add the numerators. 5 plus 4 is 9. My denominator stays 8. And again, we always leave it as an improper fraction. We don't want mixed numbers, so w equals 9/8. Now, if you don't want to do that, you're more than welcome to do that in your calculator. To put fractions in your calculator, we'd want to take 5/8 plus 1/2. We do fractions a very special way. Now, I know some of your calculators have a fraction key. We do not want to use that. Instead, what we want to do is we want to use parentheses in the division key. And we know that's okay because this fraction bar is also another way to say divided by. So 5/8 is the same thing as 5 divided by 8. So how we write that would be parentheses 5 divided by 8, close your parentheses, plus, now I want to add 1/2, so parentheses, 1 divided by 2, close your parentheses. And when we add those together, I get a decimal. Now we don't ever want a decimal as our answer unless they give us decimals to start with. Whatever they give you to start with, that's what you need to end up with. So since we started with fractions, you need to end with fractions. So each calculator is different. For my calculator, to turn this decimal into a fraction, I need to hit this button over here that says math, and then I need to hit enter on 1, and then enter again. Now your calculator might be different. If you need help to turn your decimal into a fraction, make sure you come ask, and we would be more than happy to help you. So I get W equals 9 over 8. Now that I have W equals 9 over 8, I want to check my answer to make sure it works. So I want to put 9/8 back in for W. So in my calculator, I want to take parentheses 9 divided by 8, close your parentheses, minus parentheses 1 divided by 2, close your parentheses, and we should get 5/8. So enter, and again I get a decimal when I don't want a decimal, so I need to turn it into a fraction, which is 5/8, so we're doing okay. On number 6, I have m minus -12 equals 10. Now here's the deal. When we have minus a negative or plus a negative, it's technically not a completely simplified equation, because if I wanted to do the opposite of this, would I do plus a negative or what? It's very, very confusing. So before you can get rid of this -12, you need to simplify the equation. Now we all know that minus a negative is the same thing as plus a positive. So I want to rewrite this equation as m plus 12 equals 10. So when you have an equation like this that is not simplified, please simplify it first. That's going to make it much easier to deal with when we're solving. Now to get m by itself, I can easily just subtract 12 from each side. And on the left-hand side, plus 12 minus 12 cancels out and leaves me with m. And on the right side, 10 minus 12 is -2. Variables all by itself, box your answer. And then what I'd like you to do is pause the video and substitute the -2 back into your original equation. This is very important. Do not substitute it into this blue one here that we simplified. Substitute it back into the original equation in your calculator to make sure that it works. So to do that, you're going to get parentheses -2 minus parentheses -12, and we should get an answer of +10. And we do. Number 7, again we have fractions, but that should be no issue because now we know how to do them on our calculator. So I have -3/8 plus x equals 5/8. Now, I want to get the x all by itself, and what's happening right now is we are adding a -3/8. Now, some of you might be tempted, well, we have an add here, so I want to subtract to get rid of this, but that's not what we need to look at. This is very, very important. To get the x by itself, since the variable comes second, we need to look at the sign in front of whatever comes first. So this 3/8 here is negative, so that could be rewritten as x minus 3/8, which would be a little bit easier to work with. But I just want you to be aware before you start adding or subtracting, look at the sign in front of that number. Since this is a -3/8, we need to do the opposite of whatever is there. So it's a -3/8. To get rid of it, we're going to want to add 3/8 to each side. Now when I add 3/8 to the left side, it's going to cancel out and just leave me with a positive x. And on the right side, lucky us, we already have common denominators, so I can just add the numerator. 5 plus 3 is 8, and then I have a denominator of 8. But we need to make sure our fraction is simplified before we can move on. So 8 over 8 can definitely be simplified into x equals 1. Now, this is your final answer. Box this guy here because this is not simplified. Now what I'd like you to do is pause the video and check that in your calculator. Alright, hopefully you had parentheses negative 3/8, close your parentheses, plus 1, and you should have gotten a fraction of 5/8 as your answer. On number 8, I have k plus negative 9 equals 7. Now, notice I have plus and negative. This is not a simplified equation. So what we need to do is rewrite this guy so we don't have a plus and negative. So instead of saying k plus negative 9, that's the same thing as k minus 9 equals 7. Now it's much easier to solve. So to get rid of this minus 9, we need to add 9 to each side. When I add 9 to the left side, it's going to cancel out and leave me with k. And when I add 9 to the right side, 7 plus 9 is 16. Variables all by itself. Box your answer. Take a second and check that in your calculator. Alright, when you substitute it back in, don't forget you want to substitute it back into the original equation. So we should have parentheses 16 plus parentheses negative 9, which gives us a result of 7, which is what we wanted. Alright, now what I'd like you to do is pause the video and complete number 9 and 10 on your own or with a table partner. Alright, on number 9, when you subtract 0.2 from each side, you should get x equals negative 3.4. And then on number 10, notice the variable comes second, so you need to look at the sign in front of the 19. And since it's a positive 19, that's kind of like saying there's an imaginary plus sign right in front of it. And to get rid of the positive 19, we need to subtract 19 from each side, and we're left with h equals negative 23. Now on the back side, we're still going to be working on single-step equations, but this time instead of working with basic addition and subtraction problems, we're going to be dealing with multiplication and division problems. So on number 11, we have 3 times h equals negative 42. So instead of using the subtraction and addition property of equality, we're going to be using the multiplication and division properties of equality. So it's the same concept. Here we're taking a 3 and multiplying it by h. Now to get h by itself, we need to do the opposite of multiplication, which is actually division. So to get rid of this 3, I want to divide each side by 3. So on the left side, when I divide by 3, 3 divided by 3 cancels out and just leaves me with an h. On the right side, now we can take negative 42 divided by 3, and you're definitely allowed to use your calculator. So negative 42 divided by 3 gives me negative 14. So h equals negative 14. Now that you have the variable all by itself, box your answer. And let's check it in our calculator. So we want to substitute negative 14 back in for h. We want to put it in parentheses. So we're going to take 3h, but 3 times negative 14. So 3 parentheses negative 14, close your parentheses. And our goal is to get negative 42. And we do. On number 12, we have 8 times m equals 16. So to get m by itself, we want to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So we're going to divide each side by 8. 8 divided by 8 cancels out and leaves me with m. And on the right-hand side, 16 divided by 8 gives me 2. And again, we can substitute that into our calculator. So 8 times parentheses 2 gives me 16. We're good to go. On 13, we have negative 3t equals 51. Now some of you might be tempted to add 3 to each side, but be careful. It's not what's happening in front of the variable, it's what's happening, or in front of the constant, it's what's happening in between them. Notice how they're right next to each other, so they're being multiplied. So we want to divide each side by that negative 3. Having no luck with my pen today. Now if I divide the left side by negative 3, that cancels out and leaves me with t. Now on the right side, if I take 51 and divide it by negative 3, I'm left with negative 17. So t equals negative 17. Go ahead and pause the video and check that into your calculator. And we should get that negative 3 times negative 17 is positive 51. On 14, I have h over 3 equals negative 2. Now, I want to do the opposite of whatever is happening to get that variable all by itself. So I have h divided by 3. Now the opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So to get rid of this divided by 3, I need to multiply the left side by 3, which also means I need to multiply the right side by 3. Now, if I take 3 times h over 3, here's what's really happening. I have 3 times h over 3. Well, I would turn this into a fraction, which would be 3 over 1. And then I'd take numerator times numerator, which is 3 times h, over denominator times denominator, so 1 times 3, which is 3. Now to simplify this, 3 divided by 3 cancels out and just leaves me with h. So whenever you multiply something by what's in the denominator, they are always going to cancel out and just leave you with that numerator, which is h. Now over here, I have negative 2 times 3, which is negative 6. Now we can substitute it back into our calculator and check to make sure that we did it correctly. So I want to take negative 6 and substitute it in for h. So I'm going to take parentheses negative 6, close my parentheses, divided by 3, and I get negative 2. So we are okay. On number 15, I have 1/8 times m equals 6. Now here we're working with multiplication, so our first instinct is going to be to divide each side by 1/8 to get the m by itself. However, we never ever divide by a fraction. Instead, what we want to do is multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of coming over here and saying, I'm going to divide by 1/8, that's not okay. If you do that, I will take off points. Instead, we need to multiply by the reciprocal of 1/8, which is just 8 over 1, or 8. So if I multiply the left side by 8, I need to multiply the right side by 8. 8 times 1/8 will cancel out and leave me with m. And on the right side, 6 times 8 is 48. Now to check this in my calculator, we're going to take 1/8 times 48. So we're going to say parentheses 1 divided by 8, close my parentheses, times parentheses 48, and we get 6. On number 16, I have 2/5 times p equals 3/7. Now again, we do not want to divide by a fraction. Instead, we need to multiply it by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply the left side by the reciprocal, which is 5 over 2, and the right side by 5 over 2. Now on the left side, 5 over 2 times 2 over 5, when you multiply something by its reciprocal, they cancel out and just leave you with p. On the right side, I'm going to have 3 over 7 times 5 over 2, so numerator times numerator over denominator times denominator. 3 times 5 is 15, over 7 times 2 is 14. Leave it as an improper fraction, and let's make sure that it doesn't simplify before we move on. So 15 over 14, there is no common denominator, or common factor, so it is simplified. Now let's check it in our calculator. So I want to take 2/5 times 15/14. So 2 over 5 times 15 over 14. Turn it into a fraction, and we get 3/7. Number 17, I have negative 1/4 k equals negative 2.5. So what I would like you to do is go ahead and pause the video and do 17 on your own or with a table partner. Alright, hopefully what you noticed is you needed to multiply each side by the reciprocal, which is negative 4 over 1. On the left side, it's going to cancel out and leave you with k. And on the right side, we're going to take negative 2.5 times negative 4, and we should get a positive 10. And you should have already checked that in your calculator, which does work out. Number 18, again, go ahead and pause the video and do that one with your table partner. All right, hopefully that you multiplied each side by negative 8 over 3. Left side will cancel out and leave me with m. Right side, 7 times negative 8 over 3 is the same thing as 7 over 1 times negative 8 over 3. 7 times negative 8 is negative 56. and 1 times 3 is 3, and that does not simplify, so we are left with negative 56 over 3. Now on number 19, you'll notice that I have a mixed number, and I do not like mixed numbers. I have negative 3 1/3 times b equals 5. So before we even begin to solve this one, I want to turn this guy into an improper fraction, so then we can multiply by its reciprocal, because you cannot multiply by a reciprocal until it's only a fraction. So remember, to turn a mixed number into an improper fraction, you need to start with the denominator of this fraction that's attached to the mixed number. So this is 3, and I want to multiply it by the number in front. So I'm going to take 3 times 3, which gives me 9, and then I want to add that to the numerator. So 3 times 3 is 9, plus this numerator of 1 gives me negative 10, because I have a negative sign here, over 3. So this is actually negative 10 thirds b equals 5. Now we can multiply each side by the reciprocal of 3 over negative 10. And we want to make sure, well, we know that these cancel out leaving with b. We want to make sure this is a fraction of 5 over 1. 5 times 3 is 15. 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. And then we need to simplify. Both 15 and 10 have a 5 in common. So 15 divided by 5 is 3. Negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. And b equals negative 3/2. Number 20, go ahead and pause the video. Do it with your table partner. Alright, hopefully you notice that you multiply each side by 10 over 7. And we're left with m equals 100 over 7. Okay, on 21 through 26, these are mixed and all yours. So you're going to pause the video and you're going to complete all 6 of these on your own, and then you're going to come back and check with me. Alright, now here are the answers. On 21, we added 15 to each side, and x should equal 36. On 22, we divided each side by negative 5, and x equals 5. On 23, we multiplied each side by 5 over 2, which gave us negative 20 over 2, which we had to simplify to negative 10. 24, we multiplied each side by 7/4, which gave us k equals 56 over 20, but we had to simplify that, and k equals 14 over 5. On 25, we had to add 23 to each side, and d equals 38. And then on 26, we first had to simplify to 18 plus d. Then, since this is a positive 18, we subtracted 18 from each side, and d equals 3. Now on your homework, again, make sure you show every single step. It should look like this on every single problem. Make sure your answers are simplified before you move on, and always check them in your calculator. You should not get a single problem wrong, because you should check every single one.